Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. And for all of you tuned in, thank you for joining. The Just picking up from I had a beautiful interview last week with Victoria Robinson, and that kind of set my mind to think more about the concern within the Bible, because the last time previous to her joining, I spoke about the need to either respond and the need to not react. So responding versus reacting. And that's a bit of a trip because our general nature is to react to everything. And beyond reacting, there really isn't, we usually think of a response after the fact. So this happened, should have said that. This happened, should have behaved that way. This happened, should not have behaved that way. Response. And that response due to an exercising of our human being. That exercising um, takes time. As Paul, when he taught his doctrine, he liked to implement the need to keep under the body. Uh, says to the Corinthians, I keep under my body, and those that would have the mastery, they are temperate in all things. To the Philippians, I've learned to be content. So there's the need to be in charge, in charge over who we are, and even in an understanding of who we are not. And while that, is good for the first sense, for the sense of our human being, that falls down, that falls back to our devotional conscience. And that's sort of where I want to go into, because from becoming empty, willingly becoming a void for creation, the living God not able to create because we aren't willing to enter into a state of nothingness. And from that state of nothingness, having a vision or envisioning a practical future self or a practical present stance to get to a practical future self devotionally. And that's an experience that can't resonate with us on a personal level if we're not spending time with the character or with the mind that is within the Bible. True, but that also can't happen unless our concern becomes the concern that is within the Bible. And it's so, when I do speak to different people and I hear their thoughts, and they approach me for understanding how to better connect with their devotional character, because I'm all about letting the conversation's character breathe. I'm all about letting the conversation's character understand its own self. I'm all about the human being stepping out of the way and letting the conversation work. It's sort of like, there's the aspect of chasing for something. We want, so we chase. We want, so we chase. And like, I love to think about, like, in a relationship, when you're wanting, when you're chasing, that actually throws the other person off, because then you've got, the appearance of some motive. So the girl that you're chasing is like, listen now, you really seem like you have something else going on that you want with me. I'm just gonna, give you some friction or just cut you off completely. And same thing, it can be for male and female, and as it is in a human, aspect, so it is with life. Chasing actually brings a form of negative energy to us, because we are in a race with ourselves, but the ultimate mind that isn't in control is life's mind. So chasing actually stops us from receiving the experience and whatever else we would receive due to the force of our nature. And I'm saying that for the purpose of our devotional conversation. Our devotional conversation enters into its experience innocent. And innocent, I mean with a heart for um, the living God, with a heart for understanding creation, with a heart for using everything that has caused its trial for triumph, and doing so with the Bible in mind. But for some reason, the conversation gets lost. For some reason, communication fails. For some reason, the conversation then moves on without the original innocence that brought it to where it is. And the conversation gets caught up in belief, the conversation gets caught up in feeling, the conversation gets caught up in a lot of things, and then the conversation is found chasing an experience and is never satisfied by an experience. It is left chasing in all sorts of directions, all sorts of experiences to claim what it knows it should have within, but it doesn't yet have. It's chasing. And this illustration is, continually found within the Bible. Go to the book of Isaiah. Why are you spending money for what does not have money? Why are you drinking what will continue to make you thirsty? I can give you and show you a well of water, everlasting, that you will never thirst again. This theme is consistent, and it has a lot to do with where our devotional conversations maturity is. And it can't be where it needs to be without having its concern match. Its concern match the concern that is within the Bible. And so as I'm, reflecting on previous things said, um, previous streams recorded, reviewing them, and that train of thought that stands out to me is there is a concern within the scriptures that has to be met personally in order for us to feel that same energy to move forward into its concern. Because it's easy to get caught up in what we believe, it's easy to get caught up in what we assume the Bible to be saying. It's easy to get caught up into what we assume the Bible to be portraying, but to actually sit down with it and to let the Bible speak for itself, to learn its way of learning, to learn its way of teaching, to learn its way of speaking, and then to let that revelation be the revelation that our conversation picks up. Well, then that's the general approach that what is within us should have, because what is within us is what brought us here. We didn't, just wake up and go, Bible is everything, or God is everything in a real way. Something happened. There was a pull, and it's in the context of that pull that we should be remaining consistent in feeding what is within us. And when I'm saying what is within us, I'm meaning what is within our conversations, thoughts, and feelings. Remaining in that general approach. And I'm always saying words matter. Digesting, exercising, reflecting on, reviewing the words that are within the Bible. And it's pretty consistent from the Psalms to Isaiah. Words are at the key to the mind investigating the things that are within the scriptures. My zeal is hot because of the reproach given to your words, says the psalmist. The words are so key. The words are so important. It is the words that our conversation is to form a relationship with. Because it's these words that, when put into practice, when put into play, are to help our conversation form a relationship with our human being. And that's where the general, subject or thought of my show Justification, where it's currently at this moment, even though there's a discussion about um, the nature of Paul and the nature of Paul's doctrine, the origin of where Paul's doctrine may have come from. And even though that subject is there within justification, the underlying point is that being able to rationalize origin of philosophy, we then have a sense and are becoming mindful to dip right into the scriptures to understand its general context so that what is within us can marry what is within us, or our human being, or the being of our human, may be able to marry the being of our devotional conversation. It's it's marriage, and it's the words. It's the words that are to serve as a mediator, as an officiating, priest. Think about an official marriage as an officiating priest, as an officiating, you know, civil citizen leading a marriage, or any sort of official there between male and female getting married. That's what the Bible's words are supposed to be for us. And more specifically, when learning those words and when allowing the nature of those words to work, and a sure and underlying philosophy is to develop. And of course, I show that underlying philosophy is Emmanuel, but from applying Emmanuel, which is the living God within us, our conversation, a personal understanding of that philosophy is to latch on to the being of our conversation, to give it the fire, to continue to give it the fuel that it needs to move forward and to respond to the things that life is going to bring against it. Because once we have that developing foundation, now we can then go into our daily lives, and everything that takes place in our daily lives, it can fall back to the developing character within our conversation, so that by the time it hits our human being now has a counselor, now has a spouse that it can labor with in its struggle. And the two now, instead of our human being catching a fit and arguing because of something that's happening, instead of our human being getting depressed or feeling low or not understanding how to handle itself in times of stress or in times of need, having no reminder that it is being heard. Now, having a spouse next to it, the devotional conversation, it has its spouse. And having its spouse, it has a soldier, it has a companion, has a comrade, has a spouse to go through whatever it needs to go through, and it's not alone. Our human being, the being of our human, is it's not alone now, because it has the son, it has or the daughter of the living God's creation as its spouse. And when I talk about response, when I talk about responding to our conversation's need to fill what it needs to be filled with nothing else, with it willingly becoming empty and the Bible being the only guide, when I talk about responding to the experience of that, I'm talking about the creative work that goes into marriage, the creative work that goes into marriage. And the creative work that goes into marriage is a work understanding the language of the spouse. And it doesn't matter if you and your spouse literally speak the same native tongue. It doesn't matter, whatever you want to hold that to. There is an art to and for love and loving. There is an art to for love and loving. And the art of love and the art of loving has a lot to do with understanding the speech of our spouse's character. If the speech of our spouse's character, and if they allow us, and if our spouse allows us to understand the speech of their character, if they're not, you know, keeping things, their character to themselves, if they're not withdrawing, if they're not robbing you of time for spending with them, and if you yourself are not robbing them time, spending time with you, the development of the language of character is the response, is the art of marriage. And so when it comes to our devotional conversation, this is everything that the Bible talks about. The Bible talks about do not neglect your spouse. She is the, or he is the spouse of thy youth. And that's a key term there because this youth doesn't actually mean like literal youth. It means youth in devotional mind. From the moment that we stepped foot into wanting to understand something within the scriptures, a spouse was given to us. Now, we didn't know that spouse. We were in the dating phases when we first stepped foot into something contained within the Bible. But when we did not step into it alone. In that youthful moment, in those youthful times, we had a spouse. We were in a dating phase. And so often the dating phase gets put off and we move on to an inclination that leaves our spouse behind. And so now we're hopping from spouse to spouse, from spouse to spouse, from church to church, pastor so-and-so to pastor so-and-so, trying to find that love that we should know exists, but to us it doesn't, and yet it does because it's just in the back. It's in the background. Well, the Bible's counsel is to not forget the spouse of thy youth, and that youth meaning our conversation. When our conversation is just formed, our conversation is not formed alone. And so as our conversation is developing, as our conversation is building, there is also joined to our conversation a spouse. It's another, should I say, as the Bible would like to say, a spirit of mind. So there is a spirit joined to our conversation that exists, and that in existence, it is to be our shoulder, and we its shoulder. And as we learn, it learns, and as it learns, it educates. And more often than not, it is supposed to be educating us because it has the mind, it has the position, it has the I don't want to say this word, but quote unquote, the nature or the aspect or the form of what is acceptable. While we, um, flesh-based, mind within our body, unintelligent as it is, and not keen to anything outside or above it, it takes humility on our part so that it can do its thing and so that it can speak to us so that we can learn its language of character and it can learn our language of character and the communion, forming a bond that is unmovable. And so all of that is most definitely cool, and I find it to be the most fascinating thing about the Bible because everything that I've studied so far, thus far, and for the past 11 plus years, just digging into the Bible's philosophy, what I've come to find is really not, and what has moved me to actually say something, it's not really what is popularly magnified, popularly taught in the schools or in wherever, but it is the Bible stance on the devotional conversations regeneration. How the Bible looks at the conversation as being, although formed within the religious world upon conception, unjust. The conversation is naturally unjust, and the human being is the only one to not realize this about it. And so the Bible's philosophy of taking the conversation through a process of growth and development, and even to the book of within the book of the Psalms, where it says, "To him will I show the salvation of God, like he that can, or they that can order their conversation aright." So the ordering of the conversation, the fixing of the conversation, it allows for the type of quote unquote salvation that the Bible is talking about. And the type of salvation that the Bible is talking about, it has really nothing to do with what is theorized out there. To the Bible, salvation is inward. To the Bible, the salvation is not simply inward within the human being, it is inward, firstly and primarily within the conversation. It is the conversation that is to be, quote unquote, saved, quote unquote, delivered, quote unquote, redeemed. And all of this deliverance, redemption, salvation having to do with the conversation's thoughts and feelings. Because where it is conceived, the womb that it is conceived is a womb of quote unquote religious error. And so it is the Bible's mission to guide the conversation out of religious error. Because when the conversation is in religious error, the human being is also in practical and religious error. And so this subject of responding to the Bible is something that, you know, stands out to me, especially from my interview last week with Victoria, where, even though in her early years she heard so much about the Bible, maybe she dipped into it, but it wasn't as strong as it was or should have been and is at this point in time in her life. Nevertheless, she still had words within her. Despite her seeing them on a page, she had words within her from that youth, and she carried them with her, and she exercised those words. And everything that she went through, I would like to say that I want to have her back. Have her back soon. That those words were what gave her the strength that she needed to do what she's now doing. And it always, and I will always say, due to my own experience also, with when the words settle, when the words settle in, the words become a foundation. The words become something for you to have as a ground, so that you're not just going through, even if you don't know consciously or unconsciously, you have something that is within you that is fighting for you. And when those words are fighting for you, you're going to come out better. You're going to come out aware. You may have some bruises, you may have some scars, you may be missing some limbs, but that's fine. Miss those limbs, have those scars, because every mark that our character, that we think suffers, it is a mark of beauty. It is a mark of definition. And while our lives have much unfortunate things within them at times that happen, and sometimes it seems more often than not it is unfortunate than fortunate, every unfortunate thing is supposed to give to us a definition of a vision of what is fortunate, and to carry on and to carry forward. And who knows if that vision will, make it to the fruition that we imagine it to be, but I can guarantee that the living God will take that vision and do more with it than what we think. And whoever is seeing and hearing us while we're in that movement of that mission, that vision, will hear for themselves and conduct a mission for their own self of a vision. And so that's, when it comes to response, when it comes to responding to the Bible, that's really what is, on my mind, in my heart, is to just let that response be a reformed reaction. Because no matter what, there will be reactions to catch us off guard, to catch us off of in surprise. There's nothing we can do about that, but having the temperance, having the disposition, and the exercise, because this doesn't happen overnight, having the exercise disposition to let that reaction become reformed into a response. Because then when in a response, we can move intelligently, we can move justly. And so for this week, as I always say, just take um, that thought of response and of responding, and temperately, efficiently through temperance, and cultivating that character, not thinking about ourselves in the moment, but thinking about our spouse within, and thinking about the words that our spouse has retained that can guide, that can educate, that can keep back for the purpose of our staying grounded, no matter what situation. So take that, and for this week, as I will do the same, exercising for the purpose of creation. So thank you for tuning in, and until next time.